She arrived at the ranch just before dusk, when the sky was bruised purple and the wind carried the dry smell of sage across the plains. The carriage driver barely looked at her as he unloaded her single trunk, nodded toward the house on the rise, and left without a word. The ranch stood alone, wide and low, its porch sagging slightly as if it, too, were tired of holding itself upright. She adjusted her coat, tight against the cold, and walked toward it with careful steps, as though the land itself might object to her presence. Her name was Clara Whitmore, and she had crossed half the country on paper promises and borrowed hope. The letter had been clear enough: a marriage of contract, a dying man, and a sum of money that would keep her younger sisters fed through winter. She had told herself, again and again, that she was not coming as a wife in the usual sense. She was coming as a kindness, a formality, a comfort for a man who did not wish to die alone. She would keep the house, sit by his bed, say the right words when the time came. Then she would leave. When she reached the porch, the door opened before she could knock. A tall man stood there, hat in hand, his face weathered and sharp-edged, eyes a steady gray that missed little. "You must be Mrs. Hale," he said. "Not yet," Clara replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "But I suppose soon." He studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. "Name's Jonah Reed. I'm the foreman here. Come in." He's awake. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke and medicine. It was quiet, but not empty quiet. It felt as though the walls were listening. Jonah led her down a narrow hall to a bedroom where a man lay propped against pillows, his frame diminished by illness but his eyes still sharp with life. This was Thomas Hale, the man she had agreed to marry. He smiled faintly when he saw her. "You came," he said, voice thin but warm. "I said I would," Clara answered, moving closer. She took the chair by his bed, folding her hands in her lap. The wedding was held the next morning with only a preacher, Jonah, and the cook as witnesses. Thomas insisted on sitting up, on placing the ring on her finger himself. His hand trembled, but his grip lingered, as though he wanted to remember the feel of her skin. Afterward, Jonah walked her out onto the porch. The sun was bright, unforgiving. "He won't last long," Jonah said quietly. "Doctor gives him weeks. Maybe less." "I know," Clara replied. Jonah hesitated, then said the words that would echo in her mind for months to come. "When he's gone, stay. At least a while." She looked at him, startled. "I beg your pardon. The ranch needs someone," he said. "And so will you, most likely. This place has a way of holding on to people." Clara did not answer. She told herself it was not her concern. Days passed in a slow rhythm. Clara learned the routines of the house, the times Thomas needed his medicine, the way his breathing changed at night. She read to him in the evenings, her voice filling the room with borrowed stories. Sometimes he would close his eyes and simply listen, a faint smile on his lips. Jonah was always nearby, moving through the house and yard with quiet authority. He spoke little, but when he did, his words mattered. Clara found herself noticing small things. The way he checked the fences before sunrise, the gentleness with which he handled the horses, the respect he showed Thomas even as the man weakened. One afternoon, as Clara stood at the window watching the fields ripple in the wind, Thomas spoke. "You don't belong to sorrow," he said. She turned to him. "What do you mean?" "You came here out of duty," he said. "Not love. I never expected love. But I don't want you to leave with nothing but a memory of death." She swallowed. This was the agreement. Thomas shook his head slightly. Agreements can change. When Thomas died, it was early morning. Clara held his hand as his breathing slowed, the dawn light pale and forgiving. He was gone before the sun fully rose. The house felt different after. Larger. Emptier. The funeral was small. When it was over, Clara stood by the fresh earth, unsure of what came next. Jonah approached her, his hat pressed to his chest. "You can go if you want," he said. "No one will stop you." She nodded. "I know. But if you stay," he added, "there's work. Honest work. And time." She looked at the land stretching out before her, at the house that had already begun to feel familiar despite everything. She thought of her sisters, of the money that would soon arrive, of the long road back east. "I'll stay for now," she said. Staying turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Clara took on more responsibility, learning the accounts, overseeing supplies, helping the cook. The ranch hands came to respect her, then rely on her. Jonah worked alongside her, their conversations growing easier, more frequent. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching a storm roll in, Jonah spoke without looking at her. Thomas knew what he was doing, he said. Clara frowned. How so? He hired you, Jonah said. But he gave you something else too. A chance. The rain began, slow and steady. Clara listened to it, felt the weight of the months lift just slightly. She realized then that she was no longer counting the days until she left. Life did not soften all at once. There were hard winters, lost cattle, arguments and mistakes. But there was also laughter, shared meals, quiet understanding. Jonah remained at her side, steady as the land itself. One night, long after the ranch had settled into sleep, Clara found herself standing at the same window where she had once watched the fields with uncertainty. Jonah stood behind her, close but not touching. You stayed, he said. Yes, she replied. And you're still here. She turned to face him. So are you. He met her gaze, and for the first time, there was no unspoken barrier between them. No contract. No obligation. Only choice. Outside, the plains stretched wide and open, and for the first time since her journey began, Clara felt as though she had arrived not at an ending, but at the place where her life truly began.